Depois de passarmos por 2 anos difíceis em decorrência da Covid-19, enfrentamos uma nova frente de crise derivada da guerra entre Rússia e Ucrânia, que coloca a economia mundial em contínuo estado de alerta. Cenários e previsões para comércio, transporte marítimo e portos. É este o painel em que os principais especialistas irão analisar essas tensões geopolíticas. Quais são as probabilidades de recuperação dos mercados e como as mudanças climáticas impactam neste contexto com suas consequências no transporte marítimo e de portos? Para mediar este painel, quero convidar o senhor Christopher J. Connor, presidente e CEO da Associação Americana de Autoridades Portuárias, a APA, e para participarem do painel, Jan Hoffman, chefe da Subdivisão de Logística Comercial, Divisão Tecnológica e Logística da Conferência das Nações Unidas sobre Comércio e Desenvolvimento, ele vai falar online, e Ricardo Sanches, diretor do Instituto de Pesquisas Caribenhas. Ainda Marisa Lago, subsecretária de Comércio para Negócios Internacionais do Departamento de Comércio dos Estados Unidos da América. Bem-vindos.
Seems like I'm to start, or you let me know when I start and I'm ready. But I'm not sure if you want me to start already.
Just in 1 second, Jan, okay. So let me just add to that lovely introduction. I think in the last 3 years, we've gone from the depths of despair in the early days of COVID to the historic volumes that we're driving through many ports around the globe, to now a deceleration of cargo volumes. And I think we all want to know what's next and how does climate change fit into that context. So Mr. Hoffman will start with his presentation and then followed by the other distinguished panelists, and then I'll join them and we'll have a Q&A, which Mr. Hoffman, I know due to your obligations you won't be able to join. But please, sir, go ahead.
Excellent. Yes, a wonderful good afternoon from Geneva in the Palais des Nations at UNCTAD. I trust you can see and hear me. I'm really, really pleased, and we are all lucky, I hope you agree, that today is also the day where we have launched our annual review of maritime transport, which is the United Nations publication and analytical report on shipping, with 190 pages, 80 plus charts, 17 online annexes, a lot of research, but you will have to decide for yourself. I can only present a little selection of the key and interesting issues. So let me start the sharing of the screen, and you should now be seeing something that says Review of Maritime Transport. I will do the full screen, and I hope you can, this is our launched this morning, our time, midnight, your time. We are already on Bloomberg, on Reuters, Lloyd's List, TradeWinds, quite a lot of interesting data. Now, we have limited time. Let's focus on some selected key messages. I am preaching to the converted that maritime supply chains are crucial. I think we have seen this really big reminder over the last 2 years. We have seen how the disruption is affecting everyone, and we will go through different impacts on prices, on delays, on global value chains. And if there's one thing we have learned, even that now it's getting better and freight rates are plummeting, but we need to be better prepared. So here is even a forecast. It's always dangerous to make forecasts, especially about the future. But you see here the volatility of seaborne trade, and you see our forecast based on assumptions about future investments, seaborne trade, about elasticities with GDP. So there you have some data in our report. It's overall not as good as it was on average over the last decades. So in terms of what policymakers need to do, we are always asked to make policy recommendations. What has really been new with this crisis, global economic crisis, it was a crisis of supply. If you think of past Asian crisis, financial crisis, mortgage crisis, I mean, it was always about financing, about lack of demand, about maybe trade wars, but here it is really the congestion, the delays, the lack of transport capacity. Now we are getting back to better, and a lot of the solutions really have to do about supporting growth, about vaccination and so on, but also about re-establishing supply capacity. So supply was constrained and disrupted with port congestion, with inland logistics shortages, with tight shipping availability. The crisis really caught us at a very bad moment when the order book was very low. There was not new ships coming online in the last couple of years. Now the order book is full. Next couple of years will again be a lot of new deliveries, but during the crisis, there was just not enough capacity, and ships spend 20% more on average in port. So 20% more time in port means 20% less capacity that would otherwise have been available to transport. No? So some data here about the changes in time in ports. I have put the positive numbers here in red and the negative numbers in green, because negative is good and red is bad. The point really is that above all, the container ships have spent more time. Here the increase says 13.7%. This is between 20 and 21. If I look at really pre-COVID and the latest data, it was actually plus 20%. No? Gas carriers, on the other hand, have actually seen improvements. It's a different market during the crisis. Here you see what I was referring to about the growth of the fleet here. It's all types of ships, not only containers, but you see how the growth has been really low, when in reality we would have needed more new ships compared to the growth in demand. And that is just, we have heard it now several times, you know it. During COVID, we stayed at home. We no longer went to the hairdresser, as you can see, and no longer to the restaurant, no longer shopping, no longer going outside, no longer traveling, movies, and instead ordered things online. And many of these things came from China, where then we had not enough transport capacity. So challenges ahead, we have aging ships. That may not look that dramatic growth rate here, but if year after year over the last years, ships are getting older. Of course, general cargo ships are the oldest, bulk carriers the youngest. But we had discussed this also with some of our peer reviewers of the review. What are the causes for these getting older? Of course, the reason is that there had been lots of new deliveries in the mid-end 2000s, and now these are getting older. They are long-term shipping cycles. But for a message that we think we can get out of this, lessons learned, investors are waiting. Investors in ports, in energy generation, energy distribution, ships. In what ship should I invest? Now, if I do not know what will be the future energy I'm supposed to use, the future carbon price, the future IMO regulation, combined with future trade routes now with war in Ukraine and nearshoring, friendshoring. So it's difficult to quantify what would have been the investment in new ships if everything had been as before. But there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, a lot of examples, simply the additional risk premium. I think Ricardo Sanchez, who is with you, he had pointed this out. If you have a higher risk premium, then the return on investment you need is higher before you make the investment. So I think this is among the reasons why ships are getting older. And ships that are getting older, they are not so good for emissions. On the left here, you see the total emissions over the last 11 years, up to mid this year, with thanks to data here from Marine Benchmark. It's interesting that this is going up, obviously, while it should be going down. On the positive side, I could now say, but however, on the positive side, the emissions per ton of cargo, and especially per ton mile, have been going down. That's the dark line on the right side. So that's good news. But there's another but. An important part of this improvement that we saw is actually just due to economies of scale, not really an improvement in technology and efficiency. Some of this is also due to just going slower. So it's not as good as it looks like, the right chart. And I find this a very interesting key analytic insight of our review of maritime transport 2022. So, lessons learned, preparing better for future challenges. Clearly, we need to tackle the supply side infrastructure and services constraints. Need to clean energy, low emissions future. We need predictability for investment, meaning we need as soon as possible a multilateral, predictable regulatory framework. What will be the, call it contribution, call it economic measure, call it market-based measure. And I really want to be very clear here. We are not criticizing what is happening at the IMO. On the contrary, we are supporting what the IMO colleagues are trying to achieve, the member states. And those who are afraid and reluctant and say, I'm not sure whether I should agree to this or that measure at the IMO because it will increase costs. No, if you have a levy contribution, some restriction, some imposition, technical requirement, costs will increase somehow. But the cost of not doing anything would be even higher. And the uncertainty, the insecurity for investors while we are not taking decisions is poison for investment and means, in my economics mind here, means the supply curve is more to the left than it would otherwise be. And the freight rate, the impact on freight rates is even worse than simply agreeing on some market-based measure or some really more ambitious goal at the IMO. What does this mean for prices? What do higher freight costs mean for prices? And here I'm really, really proud of what we did last year, 12 months ago in our previous review. We had produced a simulation that higher container freight rates will lead to 1.5 percentage points, 1.5% additional inflation. And at that time, you may recall a year ago, we did not yet have inflation. There were people saying, don't worry, just keep printing money. Don't worry about our transport costs. And 6 months later, meaning 6 months ago from now, the International Monetary Fund calculated that, yes, we have inflation, and 1.5%, exactly what we simulated, was due to higher container transport costs. In this review, we have looked at the impact of higher bulk grain transport costs. And here again, you see clearly an impact of higher, so very roughly, order of magnitude, about half, almost half of the increase in food prices, consumer food prices, almost half is due to higher transport costs. And what I find interesting here is that lower middle income and like say the middle income countries, the two bars, the third and the fourth, there the impact is higher than for the other groups. Why is that? Because they depend more on the import of bulk grain. The poorest countries, the low income countries, they do not import that much bulk because they don't have the capacity to produce pasta, pizza, chocolate bars, food, whatever, out of this raw material. They are more importing processed food, ready-made food. So I just find this interesting here, the linkage between global value chains, prices, and transport costs. One more chart, that's the last one. We have a special chapter on competition issues. This one I've actually updated. This is 2 more quarters, half a year further into the future than what we were able to print in the review. You see the long-term trend of bigger ships and other side of the same coin, fewer companies. So we also see vertical integration, lots of discussion here, the issue of alliances, antitrust immunity. But I actually want to point out here what is really new. I've been working on this topic of consolidation, concentration for 26 years, since 1996, when I was working for ECLAC, for CEPAL. And since then, every 1, 2, maximum 3 years, we had seen another generation of bigger ships. Look at the yellow line. It's no longer going up. Okay, there are ships on the drawing board with up to 28,000, but I think we have probably reached a maximum. The current ship size maximum in containers is roughly the same as the biggest tankers and the biggest dry bulk carriers. The shipyards, the ports, the channels, the canals, the infrastructure, that's the size, no? And I'm personally convinced we have already reached this economy of scale. I'm not a fan of big ships or even bigger ships. Now, while ship sizes increased faster than volume, there was space for fewer companies, just mathematically, the blue line went down. And also, while the big carriers were the ones who could afford the mega container ships, they were building bigger and bigger ships. They made economies of scale on the seaside. But what do you do with the smaller ships? They did not go to the scrapyard. They were returned to the market. So for years, for decades, we had oversupply. We had this race to the bottom. Freight rates were low. And maybe, just maybe, what we see here on this chart is that we are ending this. So it coincides, say, unfortunately for the scientist who wants to identify causes. So we will never know what's the cause. If we now have a change in trend, is it due to the COVID crisis? But it may be that, there's some end in this trend. Who knows? So in this context of consolidation, we do highlight that in our view, and it's not just my personal view, I would say all of us analysts here in ANCTAD, we do not think that the issue of antitrust immunity, alliances, big companies, is a cause of the supply chain crisis. The congestion in the ports, the high freight rates are not caused by the concentration. And I know that some people in your room disagree with me, but if you look how the freight rates are now tumbling and concentration is not getting less, I think I have a point. Nevertheless, we are concerned and we are worried about this process of consolidation, especially the vertical integration. So we are making proposals about more transparency, about ensuring competitive markets, strengthening competition authorities, support to the smallest, most vulnerable, and also the different regulations, the different regions. There's certainly potential for more, at least coordination, that we don't have different competition regimes in North America, in Europe, in China, in Australia, and so forth. Here you have the links, you have our emails. I am afraid I do not have time to answer questions here and now, but those who know me know I do respond to emails. I'm on LinkedIn, so I wish you a very, very successful AAPA Latino. I have been at these conferences in past decades. I hope we can come back to in-person meetings to be with you and have some caipirinha or Colombian rum or whatever it'll be. Thank you all very much.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you very much, AAPA, for this continuous confidence.
Yes, I'm here. I see Ricardo. Let me see if I can listen 2 more minutes and then I have to rush. So thanks for everything.
Okay. But let me switch to Spanish because the Latino characteristics of this meeting. Gracias entonces de nuevo a APA por la confianza continua. He representado por muchos años a Naciones Unidas, a la CEPAL, en este congreso tan exitoso. Ahora estoy aquí en nombre de Caribbean Shipping Association, que me ha honrado con invitarme a trabajar a partir de la reciente creación de Caribbean Research Institute, ¿no? Déjenme decirles que el objetivo de CRI, de Caribbean Research Institute, es aportar desde el punto de vista del conocimiento, de la capacidad analítica, del tratamiento debido de los datos, al mejor desarrollo, una mejor calidad del ambiente de negocios, pero no solamente para los miembros de Caribbean Shipping Association, sino para todos aquellos que hacen negocios en el Gran Caribe. Y digo Gran Caribe porque la asociación incluye, por supuesto, a las islas del Caribe, pero también a todos los países costeros, incluyendo a los Estados Unidos, a México, los países de América Central y los países costeros del Caribe de América del Sur. De modo que en ese sentido ahí está nuestro compromiso de seguir aportando al mejor desarrollo de esta industria. El tema que nos convoca hoy, me voy a enfocar más en la actividad de contenedores, en el comercio vía contenedores y lo que llamamos el estrés de la cadena de suministro, pero quiero hacer especial hincapié en la complejidad que tiene pensar, imaginar el futuro cercano. Y en esto claramente las condiciones económicas, las condiciones de desempeño del comercio, del transporte, de la logística, de los puertos, que se ha caracterizado, piensen ustedes, en los últimos 22, 23 años hemos tenido no menos de 3 tremendas y fuertes crisis globales que nos han afectado. Esto da un promedio de crisis, ¿sí?, mucho más corto que lo que era en la historia económica en general. Y entonces este negocio y todos los negocios se han tenido que adaptar a esa condición de volatilidad, de incertidumbre, ¿sí?, las palabras más continuas. Entonces el llamado a pensar en la complejidad del escenario es a no solamente pensar en nuestra actividad como portuarios, como carriers, como centros logísticos, como empresas, como gobiernos, etcétera, sino pensar en el impacto que tienen los shocks globales que estamos viviendo actualmente, por doble vía, por la guerra que azota a una pequeña parte del mundo, pero con un gran impacto en el resto del mundo. Por supuesto, los disturbios macroeconómicos que se han asociado con estas crisis globales. Estamos viviendo un periodo de inflación para la mayoría de los países del mundo inédito en los últimos 30 años, ¿sí? Países que venían con una inflación anual del entre 2 y 3%, hoy enfrentan inflaciones 3, 4, 5 veces superior. Esto es un cambio tremendo. El riesgo de la recesión asociado a alta inflación, pues es uno de los escenarios más complejos que hemos enfrentado. Estamos pensando, por supuesto, en el estrés de la cadena de suministros, en los problemas que ya mencionó Jan Hoffman de congestión, de falta de equipos, de falta de trabajadores debido a la pandemia. Y me voy a concentrar después en el alza de los fletes marítimos, que tiene un impacto enorme en el mundo, pero muy especialmente en América Latina. Estamos acostumbrados a leer informes, análisis de grandes compañías consultoras, de grandes analistas que piensan en sus países, en sus regiones. Tenemos que ver qué pasa con esto en América Latina, y para eso me voy a concentrar después en algunos números. Pero, por supuesto, el comercio que se ha visto envuelto en estos altibajos, en estos problemas, el impacto social que ha tenido esta pandemia, que no ha sido solamente del ambiente de los negocios, sino una crisis humanitaria tremenda, una crisis humanitaria en las migraciones, en los efectos de las guerras, etcétera, asociadas a los shocks globales, el aumento de los precios de la energía. Las compañías en el mundo hoy tienen costos superiores en un 20% a lo que tenían hace 3 años, ¿sí? 20% de sobrecostos. Y esto se transporta, por supuesto, se traslada a aumentos de los precios. Esos problemas que llegan hasta el último consumidor, que afectan al comercio, ¿sí? Por supuesto, el problema del cambio climático, del que no se habla. Uno escucha hablar a veces a funcionarios y pareciera que no tenemos un problema con el cambio climático, nos hemos olvidado, pero ahí está, y es el futuro de la humanidad. Es decir, quiero decir con esto que no podemos seguir pensando en la logística, en el puerto, en el barco. Tenemos que pensar en este gran panorama que es complejo, pero que también ofrece un mundo de oportunidades. Y esta es un poco la idea, esto tomado cuando uno lo ve desde las ciencias duras, desde la física, desde la química. Estamos hablando de un problema molecular donde los átomos, que son todos estos temas que hemos estado mencionando, interactúan y ocurre la reactividad, ocurre la atractividad, ocurren los efectos cruzados. Es muy importante. No podemos pensar en la cadena de suministro sin olvidarnos del comercio. No podemos olvidarnos del comercio, no podemos olvidarnos de los problemas macroeconómicos, de la inflación, que afecta los salarios reales de muchos trabajadores, que son los que consumen, se han contraído. Pues entonces, ¿por qué va a crecer el comercio? Si además hay un problema en la cadena de suministro. Estamos en una encrucijada desde el punto de vista de los disturbios macroeconómicos asociados a los shocks globales. Una gran encrucijada que nos deja en el borde de la recesión, ¿sí? Y con la expectativa, creo que estos próximos 3 meses son claves, ¿sí? Si vamos hacia un soft landing, a un soft crash, ¿ah? Hay señales alentadoras hoy que quizás el impacto sea menos duro del que esperábamos hace 3 meses, pero el ajuste de esto va a ser doloroso. Lo dijo el presidente de la Reserva Federal de los Estados Unidos. Ojalá hubiera una solución menos dolorosa, pero pareciera que es difícil. El comercio, hemos visto problemas, la Organización Mundial de Comercio augura un año, si bien el año está terminando con unos números no tan malos, ¿eh? Pero pareciera que el 2023 también viene con problemas. No entren en detalles viendo el el comercio vía contenedores, no entren en detalle de mirar cada número, ¿sí? Miren la película, hay más celdas rojas que azules. Eso quiere decir que el comercio vía contenedores tiene y está teniendo un impacto negativo. Como es en América Latina, pues tenemos esta doble visión, ¿no? Hay partes de la región que se han contraído este año respecto al año pasado, hay partes que han crecido. Estos son los números más actuales que se pueden tener hasta el cierre de los datos de comercio por contenedores que nosotros recogemos, y aquí están en la mayoría de los países hasta septiembre, octubre, en algunos un poquito más demorados, pero ahí otra vez, mirando la película, uno ve impacto negativo, ve números rojos, pero también en otras regiones ve números azules. La flota que disponemos en la región se ha mantenido pareja, se ha mantenido estable en América Latina. Esa es una buena señal. Esto es en la costa este que he tomado como ejemplo, esta costa donde estamos nosotros ahora, en los distintos servicios con Norteamérica, con Asia, internamente, ¿sí? Con Europa, por supuesto. Sin embargo, ¿qué vemos? Que la oferta que veíamos en las láminas anteriores, esta oferta que se nota estable, en la realidad no lo fue. No lo fue. Fíjense ustedes, si uno ve la oferta efectiva de servicios marítimos, se ha contraído. Si uno mira mes a mes de cada año, respecto al mismo mes del año anterior, vas a ver que todas prácticamente se fueron contrayendo. Es decir, hubo menos oferta efectiva. ¿Por qué? Por las congestiones, por los blank sailings, por los problemas operativos. A la hora de la verdad, teníamos el año pasado una demanda que crecía, porque el comercio crecía, por suerte, pero teníamos una oferta de transporte que se achicaba. Y eso explica por qué los fletes crecieron de forma tan explosiva. Solamente fíjense sobre el final se empieza a notar esa recuperación. Esto es la oferta, la cantidad de barcos con su capacidad que cada mes venían a nuestras costas aquí en Sudamérica. Esto hizo que los precios se dispararan. Si uno mira los números de recién y esta contracción en la oferta con lo que pasaba en el mundo en general, vas a ver lo mismo. Mientras que en el 2019, más de 8 de cada 10 servicios marítimos cumplían su servicio semanal, llegando a horario, ¿sí? Fíjense ustedes cómo este año todavía estamos con entre 3 y 4 servicios, cumpliendo, ¿sí? Eso hace que la oferta se contraiga. Y en microeconomía uno aprende el primer año en la universidad que cuando la demanda presiona para arriba y la oferta presiona para abajo, el precio se dispara. Y entonces, ¿cómo se ha disparado? Y esto es el estrés de la cadena de suministro. Este es el estrés. Por suerte, vemos una tendencia declinante, como mostró también Jan Hoffman. Si uno toma los números globales, la línea azul es la que representa este año, vemos una declinación importante respecto a lo que habían sido, ¿no? La línea naranja del 2021 y las otras, 2020, 2019. Esta tendencia decreciente, por suerte, se verifica en los grandes mercados. Fíjense ustedes ahí, qué pasa con el comercio entre Asia y los Estados Unidos, entre Asia y Europa, ¿sí? Y se mantiene, se verifica. Efectivamente, están cayendo los fletes. Pero esto no ocurre para todas las rutas del comercio. Y esto es lo que nos preocupa fuertemente en América Latina. Fíjense ustedes que si uno mira la costa este de América del Sur con Europa, los precios se mantienen altísimos, incluso crecientes. Fíjense ustedes con Estados Unidos, ¿sí? En la importación y en la exportación. ¿Qué pasa con el Caribe? El Caribe, seguimos pagando unos precios altísimos en el Caribe, ahí se ven los números. Y el Caribe depende, para toda su actividad, para el turismo, para la vida diaria, depende de este comercio, de estas importaciones, porque tristemente no hay mucha producción, digamos, en el Caribe. Pero fíjense ustedes que quitando este caso, donde sí claramente se ve una reducción, el resto de América Latina se ve todavía con fletes muy altos. Entonces, cuando leemos los informes de los grandes analistas que vienen desde Europa principalmente y nos dicen qué bueno que los precios están bajando, sí, qué bueno, pero acá no. Entonces, déjenme quedarme con esta reflexión. Esto es lo que nos está pasando. Seguimos en un ambiente donde la macroeconomía no nos acompaña. El comercio está ahí en una encrucijada de ojalá el próximo año, no con números muy espectaculares, pero sí una recuperación. Pero mientras tanto, América Latina llevamos todo este año, más lo que fue el peor año de la pandemia, más lo que había sido el 2019, que no había sido un buen año para el comercio. Solo que ahora pagamos unos fletes mucho más caros. No quiero ni se debe tener una visión negativa, pesimista, pero sí realista. Muchísimas gracias.
Well, thank you, Christopher, for having me here. I've really welcomed your opening remarks in which you described your new Powers initiative, and we're very much looking forward to working with you on this initiative going forward. And to both John and Ricardo, having spent 7 years at a finance ministry, the U.S. Treasury Department, it was such a delight to hear a good macroeconomic analysis, which is so essential to those of us who are policymakers. So thank you for that. I'm Marisa Lago, and it's a pleasure to be here representing the U.S. Department of Commerce's International Trade Administration, or ITA. This is the second time that we are participating in the AAPA Latino Conference, so thanks for having us back, Chris. So at ITA, we are committed to building a more prosperous and inclusive economy through strengthening the competitiveness of U.S. industry and its workers, promoting fair trade and investment, and ensuring fair trade practices. Two of our key priorities are also at the top of the agenda for ports and maritime industries, namely ensuring resilient and secure supply chains and combating climate change. The port and maritime industry is so close to my heart. Growing up near the Brooklyn docks in New York City, ports have always been a part of my life and a reminder of home. From my grandfather's job as a cook on a tugboat in New York Harbor to my uncles working on an ocean liner, running voyages to exotic ports throughout South America, I've always seen the ocean as a source of livelihood and a gateway to adventure. And today, while I live in Washington, whenever I'm home in my native New York City, I so look forward to hearing the foghorns in New York Harbor and to seeing, the second I step outside my front door, the industrial maritime traffic on the Hudson River. In my previous role, I was director of the New York City Department of City Planning, and I oversaw the city's comprehensive waterfront planning process, in which we examined all of the multiple uses of the waterfront, and always through an equity lens. So I am a firm believer in both the current power and the future potential of maritime industries, or what we at the U.S. Department of Commerce call the blue economy. So maritime logistics are the backbone of global commerce. More than 5 and 6 cubic meters of international trade in goods are transported by sea. This immense enterprise, with nodes spanning the globe, raised thorny challenges, and most especially with respect to supply chains and climate. Indeed, if the maritime sector on its own were a nation, it would be the 8th largest emitter globally. The scope and the urgency of improving sustainability and ensuring robust supply chains across the industry demands collaborative, innovative solutions. Our team at the U.S. Department of Commerce's International Trade Administration are working to forge a more sustainable and resilient maritime sector. Consistent with President Biden's commitment to combat the climate crisis at home and abroad, we're harnessing the power of trade, we're forging international cooperation, and we're leveraging the innovation of the private sector to reduce emissions and to accelerate the clean technology transition, including in Latin America's maritime industries. As those here today know, ports are central to this work. They're not only affected by the consequences of climate change, they play an essential role in confronting it through onshore and vessel technologies that are decarbonizing the industry. Our team is proud to help drive this work, starting with our U.S. Go Green and Blue initiative, which we launched at the AAPA Latino Conference last year in Bogota. And we're enthusiastic about continuing it through active participation with AAPA throughout the year and at future Latino conferences. Included under the mantle of Go Green and Blue are our efforts to promote clean technologies and supply chain sustainability throughout Latin America. And we do this through trade missions, through export promotion, and through engagement with our foreign government counterparts to foster policies that encourage innovation in this important sector. Now, of course, we recognize that governments alone cannot provide adequate climate solutions in ports and maritime industries, and that is why our team is supporting cutting-edge U.S. climate technology firms that are seeking to export their solutions to global markets, thereby helping partner industries and partners and allied governments to accelerate the transition to net zero emissions. At the same time, we're also seeking out similar climate-focused companies abroad and encouraging these producers of innovative technology and of critical inputs to invest in the United States to strengthen clean tech supply chains and to help meet the growing regional and global demand for these important solutions. Just as clean tech supply chains are integral to making our ports and maritime industries more sustainable, so too are maritime logistics at the heart of global supply chains, ensuring the wide distribution of goods and commodities, including those on which our health, prosperity, and security rely. From COVID-19 to Russia's unjust and illegal invasion of Ukraine, recent shocks to global supply chains have underscored the urgent need to build long-term resilience, dependability, and security among trusted partners. Through technology like real-time monitoring and forecasting solutions that are made possible by open markets, we can increase visibility and transparency, both of which improve logistics and efficiency. Here, too, our ITA, our International Trade Administration team, is driving progress in close cooperation with international and private sector partners. Our supply chain industry specialists work closely with U.S. industry to identify the latest developments in freight transportation and logistics, including in the maritime sector. This information can then be used to support industry in reducing its carbon footprint and enhancing the competitiveness of sustainable U.S. transportation and logistics services. Our team recently released a supply chain sustainability report, which examines key trends, public and private sector initiatives, and technologies across the major modes of freight transportation. This sustainability report also sets out how the Biden administration is working with industry to reduce emissions. And we're going to use the sustainability report to inform our climate work going forward, and most especially on the Go Green and Blue initiative. But as I speak today, surrounded by experts and decision makers from around the region, it is clear that our work has to extend beyond the U.S. domestic industry. We're eager to partner more closely with Latin American governments and industry on supply chain issues. This is an integral part of our broader engagement in the hemisphere, an engagement that is grounded in three overarching priorities: competitiveness, transparency, and security. While supply chains and climate issues may dominate much of our time together, I'll note that there is huge untapped potential in maritime logistics, and most especially where logistics intersect with data flows. We at the Department of Commerce see the blue economy as a knowledge-based economy, looking to the sea not only for the extraction of resources, but also for the figurative mining of data. In collaboration with our colleagues at the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, commonly known as NOAA, we're working to advance business opportunities in this nascent space, both within the United States and around the globe. From harnessing the next generation potential of the blue economy to ensuring resilient supply chains to accelerating clean technology adoption, our ITA team is fully committed to supporting sustainable growth in ports and maritime industries across the Americas. And so to that end, I am going to end by inviting you to visit our ITA booth just outside the expo room And there you can meet some of the many team members from ITA who are based in Washington, in Brazil, and in countries throughout Latin America. At our booth, you can learn more about what we can do and how we can support you. So thank you once again to AAPA, and I look forward to seeing you on the expo floor.
Do we have time for one question? So I understand we have a hard stop for probably a much-needed coffee break, but I think that gives us a chance for one question to each of our distinguished guests. And Ricardo, I'll start with you. So just one question each. But what do you think about this? Is the maritime sector better prepared for the next pandemic, whatever that looks like, whenever it comes? Are we better prepared from the experience that we've had over the last few years?
Yes, absolutely. I think the maritime sector is well prepared because this experience was very important, yeah, at least. Then I think we have a challenge with preparation in terms of order books, new vessels coming to the sector, but I am not sure about the climate issue with the global fleet, yeah? Because I think we need to put more efforts for strongly going to the SDGs accomplishments. Then, in terms of operating side, I think we are well prepared. But in the entire scenario, I have some doubts.
Thank you. Undersecretary Lago, and totally appreciate the mission of ITA, and I'm curious, when you talk to U.S. companies who are looking or asking for support from the U.S. government, and they want to do business in Latin America, what are you hearing? What are they looking for?
Well, first I want to emphasize the significant interest that U.S. companies have in Latin America. Look, there are a large number of consumers in the region, and also there are dynamic and varied industries, so lots of interest. But there are challenges to operating here. To be able to be successful, you have to have in-depth knowledge about country by country and also industry by industry. I think it's a mistake for anyone to paint Latin America with one brush. It is a collection of different countries with different industries with different strengths. The hurdles vary, again, by country and by industry, but they generally could be regulatory hurdles, they could be business practices, they could be cultural differences. Frequently, the hardest rules are the unwritten rules of the road that exist in a country or an industry. Now, there's nothing magical about what U.S. industry seeks. They look at the commercial environment. They want transparency. They want predictability. They want to know that there's respect for contracts, that intellectual property is protected, that there is a competent judiciary. This is competitiveness 101. And that actually is where ITA comes in. We have people on the ground in 70 locations around the globe, including throughout the Americas, and they work with local governments, with not local, I mean different federal governments, to work with them as they seek to enhance their business environment, because so many countries know the interest, the appetite of U.S. investors and are seeking to make those needed, if politically challenging, changes that will attract more investment. I'll give an example right here in Brazil. For, I believe, 16 years now, every year we have held a U.S.-Brazil CEO forum, and this is led by the Secretary of Commerce in the U.S. and the Secretary of the Economy in Brazil. And the CEOs present to them their ideas for what will facilitate trade between our two large countries. Also, every year, we have a commercial dialogue held at the vice ministerial level, at my level, and we chip away government to government on how we can put in place good regulatory practices that will facilitate trade. And so my final word to the folks assembled here is, if you are representing a company that is interested in expanding your market to the U.S. for the opportunities presented by our large and open market, please go to the ITA booth at booth number 8. And if you are a U.S. exporter and you would like to expand into additional markets, please reach out to us, because we blend the best of understanding our domestic industry and having a global footprint that is laser focused on enhancing trade, which we know creates jobs in both countries.
Great. Undersecretary Lago, Ricardo Sanchez, thank you for being part of this session this morning.
Thank you.